The moment Alina Voss saw the man she loved cover his face with embarrassment, she knew the engagement was over. Sunlight poured through the glass walls of the crowded garden restaurant, turning every table bright and golden, yet the expression on his face made the whole afternoon feel cold. Only minutes earlier, Alina had believed she was attending a celebration where their families would choose a wedding date. Instead, she watched Grant slide the diamond ring across the white tablecloth and explain, slowly and impatiently, that he could no longer imagine spending his life repeating himself, defending her deafness to strangers, or raising children who might inherit what he called her limitation. Alina read every word from his lips. She saw his mother looking down at her teacup. She noticed nearby diners pretending not to stare. Grant did not shout, but humiliation does not need sound to break a heart. By the time he walked away beneath the bright afternoon sky, Alina was still seated with the ring in front of her, her hands trembling beside a bouquet of yellow roses that suddenly looked like flowers left at a funeral. Before we continue, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Eco-Verse if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that begin when one wounded person chooses to see another. Alina remained at the table until the waiter gently placed the bill beside her. She was 32, an accomplished landscape architect who could turn empty concrete courtyards into living gardens, yet at that moment she felt smaller than she had as a frightened 8-year-old waking in a hospital after the illness that took most of her hearing. She had spent years proving that deafness was not emptiness. She could communicate through sign language, read lips, speak clearly when she chose, feel music through vibrations, and notice details that people surrounded by noise often missed. Still, Grant's words reopened every wound she thought had healed. She remembered schoolmates mocking her hearing aids, employers speaking to her interpreter instead of her, and dates who praised her strength until communication required patience. By mid-afternoon, she removed the engagement ring she had worn for nearly a year, left it on the table, and stepped into the busy riverside plaza with tears blurring the world. The plaza was filled with daylight and movement. Children chased pigeons around a fountain, office workers carried paper cups, and street vendors sold fruit beneath striped awnings. Alina walked without direction, trying to breathe through the pressure in her chest. She did not notice the 4 little girls running toward her until the smallest crashed gently into her legs. Alina looked down and saw 4 nearly identical faces staring up with wide gray-green eyes. They wore matching denim overalls, but each had a different colored shirt and a different personality written clearly across her expression. One looked worried, one suspicious, one fascinated, and one on the verge of tears. Their father appeared several steps behind them, pushing an empty 4-seat stroller while carrying 2 backpacks, a lunch bag, a pink sun hat, and the exhausted expression of a man who had been negotiating with chaos since sunrise. His name was Soren, and he had brought his 5-year-old quadruplets to the plaza after a difficult morning at the pediatric clinic. Before he could apologize for the collision, the boldest girl, Maribel, noticed the silver hearing devices behind Alina's ears. Instead of staring with discomfort, she lifted both hands and made a clumsy sign. Alina blinked in surprise. The child had signed hello. Then the other 3 joined her, their small fingers moving imperfectly but eagerly. Soren looked embarrassed and explained that his daughters had learned several signs at preschool because one of their classmates was hard of hearing. Alina's sadness briefly loosened its grip. She crouched and signed hello back. The quadruplets burst into delighted smiles, then the quietest child, Isolde, studied Alina's tear-streaked face and noticed the faint mark where a ring had been removed. She looked at her sisters, then at Soren, and asked the question that would change all 6 of their lives. Moving her lips carefully and adding a few uncertain signs, she wondered whether Alina was their new mommy. Soren nearly dropped the lunch bag. Alina stared at the 4 hopeful faces, stunned by the innocence of the question. The girl's mother had died 3 years earlier, and although they remembered almost nothing about her, they had begun asking why every other family at school seemed to have someone who braided hair, attended costume days, and knew how to repair the emotional disasters that Soren sometimes tried to solve with snacks and duct tape. Maribel quickly explained that their father had said they would not search for a new mother because love could not be ordered like groceries. But since Alina had appeared beside the fountain and already knew how to talk with hands, the girls had decided perhaps love had found them instead. The timing was so impossible that Alina almost laughed. Moments earlier, one man had rejected her because he feared she would never fit naturally into a family. Now 4 children who did not know her name were looking at her as though she had arrived to complete theirs. Her laugh came out mixed with tears. Soren apologized repeatedly, but Alina shook her head and assured him that the question had not hurt her. In truth, it was the first thing that had made her feel human all afternoon. A gust of wind suddenly lifted Isolde's sun hat and sent it skimming toward the bicycle lane. The child ran after it before anyone could stop her. A delivery cyclist rounded the corner at speed, unable to see the little girl until the last second. Alina sensed the danger through movement rather than sound. She saw the cyclist's shadow stretch across the pavement, saw the wheels approaching, and lunged forward. She pulled Isolde against her chest and rolled onto the grass as the bicycle swerved past. The plaza erupted in alarm, but Alina heard only a muffled rush. She felt Isolde shaking in her arms and saw Soren racing toward them, his face drained of color. Isolde was unhurt, but Alina had scraped her elbow and torn the sleeve of her blouse. Soren knelt beside her, overwhelmed with gratitude. He looked at the woman his daughters had met less than 5 minutes earlier and realized she had noticed what dozens of hearing people around them had missed. She had reacted without hesitation, protecting his child with her own body. Alina tried to dismiss it, yet Soren insisted on taking her to the nearby urgent care clinic. With 4 frightened girls refusing to leave her side, she finally agreed. The clinic visit lasted less than an hour. Her injury was minor, but something shifted during that bright afternoon. The girls drew pictures while they waited, covering scrap paper with 6 figures standing beneath an enormous yellow sun. In every drawing, Alina stood beside Soren. She was taller than the children, wore a blue dress, and had silver stars near her ears. When Alina asked about the stars, Maribel signed that they were not hearing aids. They were little pieces of moonlight that helped her understand the world differently. Soren watched Alina turn away to hide her tears. He sensed that her sadness had existed before they met, but he did not press her. He simply offered her water and asked whether someone could drive her home. When she admitted that the person who had brought her to the restaurant had left, Soren understood more than she intended to reveal. He offered a ride, and though Alina hesitated, the 4 children began chanting her name after learning it. Their voices were mostly lost to her, but she felt their excitement through the vibration of the bench and saw it in their faces. Soren's life was far from the glamorous future Grant had once promised Alina. He owned a small furniture restoration workshop near the old market and lived above it in a sunlit apartment that always smelled faintly of cedar, pancakes, and washable paint. His days began before dawn and rarely ended before midnight. Since his wife's death from a sudden heart condition, he had raised the quadruplets alone, turning down larger contracts because childcare cost more than he earned. He had learned to braid hair through online tutorials, pack 4 different lunches without mixing allergies, and smile through the terror of knowing that one illness or missed payment could pull their fragile life apart. Yet he never spoke of his daughters as burdens. To him, exhaustion was simply the price of loving 4 people more than himself. Alina expected their meeting to remain a strange, tender memory. But 2 days later, Soren sent her a message thanking her again and attaching a photograph of the girls holding a sign written in uneven letters. They wanted to invite her to the workshop's community garden day the following Saturday. Alina almost declined. Since the breakup, she had ignored friends, missed work, and kept the curtains closed against the brightness outside. Yet the photograph showed 4 hopeful faces and 1 empty space between them. She agreed to attend for 1 hour. She stayed until sunset. The workshop courtyard was neglected, filled with cracked pots, dry soil, and a broken wooden bench. Alina arrived with gardening gloves and quietly transformed the children's chaotic planting project into something beautiful. She taught them to loosen roots, press herbs gently into soil, and arrange flowers by height and sunlight. Soren repaired the bench while watching her move among his daughters with natural patience. She never demanded that they face her before speaking, she simply guided them to communicate clearly. When they forgot a sign, she waited. When they made mistakes, she smiled. By late afternoon, the courtyard smelled of mint, lavender, and fresh earth. The girls had dirt on their cheeks, Soren had paint on his shirt, and Alina realized she had gone several hours without thinking about Grant. The Saturdays continued. Then came weekday lunches, school events, garden projects, and quiet afternoons at the workshop. Alina taught the family more sign language, but Soren insisted on learning properly instead of depending on her to lip read. He practiced after the girls went to bed, watching lessons until his hands ached. He learned how exhausting it was for Alina to constantly interpret people's mouths, expressions, and incomplete gestures. He learned to switch on captions without being asked, touch the table to get her attention rather than calling from another room, and face the light when he spoke. None of these actions felt heroic to him. They were simply ways of saying that her presence mattered. Alina, however, remained afraid. Kindness had fooled her before. Grant had once seemed patient too, until patience became resentment. She worried that Soren saw her only as the woman who saved his daughter, or as convenient help in a home that desperately needed another adult. She loved the girls more each week, and that love frightened her most. If Soren changed his mind, she would not lose one person. She would lose 5. Her fear grew worse when Grant returned. He appeared one bright morning at the architecture firm carrying the same yellow roses he had abandoned at the restaurant. He claimed he had made a mistake, that his family had pressured him, and that seeing photographs of Alina with Soren's children online had made him realize she could be a mother after all. His apology was dressed as regret, but underneath it remained the same insult. He valued her now because another family had proved she was useful. Alina refused him, yet the encounter unsettled her. That evening, she arrived at Soren's workshop and saw him speaking with a stylish woman near the entrance. The woman touched his arm and handed him an envelope. Alina could not hear the conversation, and from across the room she could not read their lips. Old insecurity filled the silence with its own cruel story. She assumed the woman was someone from Soren's past and left before he noticed her. The truth was less dramatic but more painful. The woman represented a development company that had purchased the workshop building. Soren had 30 days to leave. He had hidden the problem because he did not want Alina to feel responsible for rescuing them. When she stopped answering messages, he assumed Grant had returned and that she had chosen the safer life she deserved. For nearly a week, both suffered inside stories created by fear. The quadruplets finally ended the silence. During a daytime school performance, Alina entered the auditorium to deliver garden designs to a teacher and saw the 4 girls on stage. Their class was singing, but Maribel, Isolde, Fenna, and Coralie were signing the song instead, their little hands moving together beneath the stage lights. In the front row, Soren signed every word back to them. Then he saw Alina standing near the doors. The children spotted her moments later and abandoned their careful positions, racing from the stage before the performance had ended. They wrapped themselves around her waist, crying and signing that they thought she had disappeared. Alina looked over their heads at Soren and understood how deeply her fear had wounded them. In the bright school hallway afterward, he told her about the eviction notice. She told him about Grant and the woman at the workshop. The misunderstanding dissolved, leaving behind a harder truth. They loved each other, but both had been waiting for abandonment. Alina admitted that she did not know how to trust a future that could vanish. Soren answered with his hands, slowly enough that she could see every sign. He did not promise that life would be easy. He did not claim love could prevent grief, illness, or mistakes. He promised only that he would never make her deafness a debt she had to repay. He loved the way she noticed sunlight moving across a room, the way she listened with her whole face, and the way his daughters became gentler because she had taught them that communication began with attention. He did not need a replacement mother for his children. He wanted Alina, and the girls loved her because she was herself. Instead of saving Soren with money, Alina helped him build a plan. She redesigned an abandoned greenhouse owned by the city and proposed turning it into a combined furniture workshop, community garden, and inclusive arts center. Soren would teach woodworking, Alina would lead garden design, and local children with hearing differences could attend programs where sign language was part of daily life rather than an accommodation added later. The proposal won public funding and private support. Within 6 months, the old greenhouse became one of the warmest places in the neighborhood, filled with sunlight, sawdust, flowers, children, and hands speaking across every room. 1 year after the afternoon at the fountain, Soren brought Alina back to the Riverside Plaza. The quadruplets wore dresses in 4 different colors and carried small pots of yellow flowers. Under the same golden daylight where she had once been humiliated, Soren knelt and offered her a ring carved from walnut and set with a small stone. He signed his proposal while the girls stood behind him, trembling with excitement. Alina looked at the man who had never asked her to become smaller, easier, quieter, or more convenient. Then she looked at the 4 children who had called her their new mommy before they even knew her name. She said yes with her voice and her hands. Their wedding took place in the greenhouse on a bright spring afternoon. The ceremony included spoken words, captions, and sign language so no one had to stand outside the meaning. The girls walked Alina down the aisle together. When asked who welcomed her into the family, all 4 raised their hands. There was no attempt to replace the mother they had lost. Her photograph rested near a small white tree planted in her memory, because true love does not erase the past to make room for the future. It expands. Near the end of the ceremony, Alina felt the floor vibrate beneath the music. She could not hear every note, but she felt the rhythm through her shoes and saw it reflected in the faces around her. Soren held out his hand. The girls joined them, and all 6 danced beneath the glass roof while daylight poured over the flowers they had grown together. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Eco-Verse. Your support helps stories of kindness, healing, inclusion, and second chances reach people who may need them most. And before this story ends, please comment, "Love listens with the heart," as a special message for anyone who has ever felt unseen, misunderstood, or unworthy of belonging. Alina once believed silence was the reason love would always leave her. But silence had never been the enemy. The real enemy was being surrounded by people who refused to understand. When she finally met a man and 4 little girls willing to learn her language, she discovered that a family is not built by perfect hearing, shared blood, or an easy past. It is built by people who turn toward one another, pay attention, and keep choosing to understand. On the afternoon she was abandoned, Alina thought her future had been taken from her. She did not know that only a few steps away, 4 small hands were already reaching out to give it back.